Thank you for tuning in to the Marching Health Audio Experience. I am Dr. Elliot Cleveland, joined by my guest, Adam Chrobak, the Executive Director of Guardians Drum and Bugle Corps. Adam, tell us a little bit about yourself so the audience has a better background of your marching experience and teaching experience.
Cool. So my name's Adam Chrobak. I'm from Austin, Texas. I grew up here, went to Cedar Park High School, and then marched 5 years of Vanguard. And then I've been like teching for like in and out, teaching visual, writing drill for like the past decade now. And yeah, I taught a little bit at the Woodlands, Westlake, and most recently I've been at Vandergrift for the past few years, since 2013. And then I was the visual caption head at Guardians in 2017 after working at Crossman and Civic Crest on visual staff from 13 through 16. And then I kind of just, I became a staff coordinator, and then I became the corps director, and then I became the executive director. Just like bam, 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 you know?
So how's that up the ranks experience been?
Oh, it's awful. It's just like, it's just, you know, it's a constant like learning experience it's like trial by fire, like literally, you know. I mean, I finally kind of get to learn some of the aspects of one job, and I'm like, bam, next job. And I'm like, okay. And now I'm like in a position where, you know, it came down to the fact where we didn't have one yet. And I was wanting to expand and do all these other things. And it became obvious that we needed to further, you know, divide up our staff. And so that's kind of just how it came to being, just, you know, being the person that was willing to do the most for the least for a long time. And it kind of fell into my lap now.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about your experience as a visual caption head, because that was when we first met, because we were talking about the health of the members that you were dealing with, you know, day to day. So give me a little bit of insight and give our audience some insight on just from day one, you becoming a caption head for the first time, to what you learned in the process, everything from teaching and managing and growing the program.
Wow. Well, I'll say, you know, the first thing is, you know, being a caption head, it seems, I remember when I was a tech, it always seems like it was just the job that you see them doing, you know? And I guess that's like the best way to put all of these jobs that I've been cycling in and out of, is like, you see people do one thing and you never really know what else they're doing, you know? And I think it's like natural to assume nothing is what they're doing. But, you know, I remember as a caption head, the first thing I learned was I have to figure out a way to manage this group of people that are my staff. Well, first you have to find a staff, you know, and that's a thing on its own. And then luckily we're in Texas, and it was very easy to find incredible people. But after that, you have to manage that staff. You have to manage all their schedules and all this kind of stuff that I just never had to do in my life, like ever. I've been in leadership roles, but nothing where I was having to like create and, you know, like physically manage people. It was always in a drum corps setting or something, you know, where someone was telling me what to do, and I was just like, hey, do what that guy said, you know? And so now I'm like, you know, having to create rules and create all these spreadsheets and keep track of stuff. And that was the first big shell shock, I think, was just trying to keep up with all that. And then, you know, people are saying like, hey, like, where's this document? Hey, like, your staff hasn't turned this in yet. And I'm just like, oh, like, you know, just figuring that all out was crazy. And then, you know, being a caption head on in spring training, I think it's also different being a caption head of an open class group, because my job title is probably misleading. And I think any caption head's title in open class, at least our organization, is kind of misleading, because on previous talks, you know, I've talked about like the fact that we just have fewer resources, and really that, you know, comes down to money, you know, and a lot of the time that makes it more difficult to, you know, either hire staff or to have the infrastructure to even have that staff. You know, it's not about just getting someone to come do it. Sometimes it's like we don't have space to travel with them, you know. So being a caption head it's one thing to do the whole educational thing and then to do the administrative stuff. But, you know, it's a lot of recruiting. It's a lot of, you know, you and I know each other because I kind of took on the social media thing early on as a caption head. It's a lot of, it's a lot of problem solving and doing jobs that you would normally probably say like, this isn't my job, you know? I would compare it a lot to maybe like if you were, you know, working at a restaurant, you have to do side work before and after you're a waiter. If anyone knows what that's like, it's like the same thing. You're not getting paid for that. It's not really part of your job, but it's something that you have to do in order for the job to work, you know?
Right.
I noticed that there were things that would go, you know, that would be going, we just didn't have enough people to take care of it. And it's like it's there, it needs to be done. And so you learn really quickly to just do those things. And luckily that's the same thing we have with all the caption heads currently, is they're all just like great team players and they understand. Like there are instances where I remember one time, like because of timing stuff, it had to be, we had to like either end rehearsal an hour early and start an hour later the next day, or we had to like let the food truck leave with the people that serve everything. So the visual staff just like puts together a bunch of sandwiches and stuff, and we served dinner. Like we made it happen because we needed that extra rehearsal. So like stuff like that, I think is probably like the hidden like tough part, but also like one of the like most rewarding parts, I think.
Right.
And then being an educator, what's up?
That really helps you develop that team that you need when you're coming together and doing the hard stuff that no one else wants to do.
Oh yeah. And it's, you know, it's something funny because, you know, in hiring practice, I do something that I would imagine most recruiters would not advise. And I just throw out all the bad stuff like immediately. I'm like, here it is. This is what you're going to be doing. Like, because I think some people come into this thinking, you know, kind of like I said, like you, as a member, you see the staff as one thing, you know, a certain thing. And you're like, oh man, the staff just like went and got McDonald's in a break, like must be nice. And the reality is, you know, that's just like your one snapshot of like whatever they're doing in their off time. You don't think about the rest of the stuff. I mean, so yeah, it's definitely something, because whenever I hire, I tell people, I'm like, you need to know you're going to serve food. You need to know you're going to take trash out. You need to know, like, you know, your instruments are going to break and we're not probably going to take them to a repair place. Like you're going to fix them.
Right.
And it's something that I just throw out there because for me and, you know, our organization, it's not worth it for either, you know, ourselves or the person we would be hiring, you know, to put a situation together where it wouldn't be compatible like that.
Right. And you and I always talk about surrounding yourself with the right people, and that being one of the most important aspects of what you do in order to make that organization great. So tell us a little bit about that.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Tell us a little bit about that aspect of things and how you build your team.
Oh, well, you know, and I think that's another funny thing that, again, probably not normal, is my interview process has a lot less to do with, you know, people in terms of like the knowledge they have in their head. Like, I don't want to quiz someone and find out what they know, because in my opinion, you know, when I look at a resume, there are certain like most resumes, like if they're built, you can tell like this person knows the stuff, like they know, you know. I think that I have a pretty good, you know, gauge on how people can teach and how they teach just based on like talking to them, because I understand some people do have a great separation, but you know, you can like learn a lot about someone just by talking to them and having a conversation. So like most of the time, like our talks, I just start talking and prying into their life. Like what's going on in your life? Oh, you work? Tell me about that. Because like, I think that we have a certain kind of student that normally comes through Guardians, and we have a certain culture. And so I try to find people that I think will kind of fit within that mold and will interact well with our students, within our culture, and also like with the other staff. Because like I said, you know, I take fully into account the reality of how long you have to sit on the road. And again, we talk about resources, you know, we're not able to fly people in and out all the time, or have, you know, massive staffs that are switching out here and there. So like a lot of the time you have staff that are on for long periods of time. So I think it's like a legitimate factor. So I consider like, can these people get along for like 4 weeks straight, like sitting next to each other all day and smelling each other? You know what I mean? Like it's something that I think it's important to take into consideration, because I've never worked under a situation where, like, I've never worked well under a situation where I wasn't having fun or enjoying the people around me personally. And I mean, maybe that's a flaw maybe for some people, I'd imagine, but to me, it's just a fact of who I am and how I see things. And so I kind of just try to build things around that to make it work.
Right. And that gives you the family vibe and the culture that you're trying to build, because you want a culture that's, I've heard you say this, it's all about the students. If you want to build the culture around the students and around the members, then you have to have that aspect of things. You can't,
Yeah, absolutely.
can't sacrifice that for the sake of winning or the sake of, the performance itself.
Right. And students these days are, I'll say more woke than ever, really. Like, when it comes to anything like scores or just like they know judges' names, like they know which ones score certain ways with them. Like, and they also, what I was getting at is they also know when staffs are like not getting along. They know when there's problems. They know when you have a personal issue in your life, like, because when you're out there, it's emotionally draining. Like the ability to hold in all of your emotions and act like it's a stone person is not like, it's not possible. And so it comes out, and I think they know. So it's like important to have people surrounding you that like can understand you better for like those moments and can like help you out and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
And I think, again, just trying to like get along sometimes can just be like such a godsend, if you will,
I completely agree. Before I went on tour in 2011, my mom said, just remember, you don't always have to like the people next to you, but you got to love them, which is the saying that needs to be like on the side of every drum corps bus before the members get on every day. But
right.
the thing I wanted to talk to you about was bent leg and straight leg marching technique, because you've done both and taught both. Give us your take and your nuances in both marching and teaching each one.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'll start with this. I think they're polar opposites, which is why I think we see such like a polar opposite response to whether people like it or not, or just generally accept it,
Mm-hmm.
The straight leg thing, and this is all personal opinion based on experience, I'll say, I'm sure that there are going to be other visual teachers that have other ideas. And I say this to my students all the time, so I'm just throwing that out there. My thing about straight leg is just, I think it is the easiest way to make your students look the same. I think it is. Now, easiest meaning if you teach it really well and train them, then it's physically the easiest. Bent leg is more difficult only because I'd say there's more moving parts. It's almost like a basketball shot, like Jerry Stackhouse, for anyone who knows that guy's name. I think he used to like bend all the way down to the floor and then like all the way up and shoot. And that was like crazy because when you watch basketball players, normally they like just kind of do, like a real quick motion. There's not a lot of extra moving parts. And that's kind of, I guess, one of the cons to bent leg is there's like a whole bunch of extra moving parts, multiple checkpoints with multiple angles. So yeah, it definitely can be, tough if you don't understand it. That being said, I think straight leg though is something that's very easily understood, depending on how you teach it. Your knee bends or barely bends, your heel just barely comes off the ground, 2 to 3 inches is what I've normally taught. And so it makes sense. And there's a 50-50 quality. So like when you're walking, that's a lot more normal. Whereas in bent leg, we actually kind of teach a more backside approach to your weight, and then it moves forward naturally. There's a lot of the naturally stuff in bent leg. And I think that's what also scares a lot of people away, especially all of our, band math nerds. Like they can't handle that.
Right. I've never personally done bent legs, so all of this is new to me. So you can go in as much detail as you want because this is new information.
Cool. Well, I'll give you a little bit, but I still have to make money. So, but it's interesting. I mean, the straight leg thing, I think, there's a very common way to teach it now. I feel like I'm very fortunate to have, I went to Vandergrift because that was actually my band director in high school who opened that school, Jeremy Spicer. And he, I came back to Austin from Houston when I did pre-med, and I was just like, not about it. And he was like, dude, show up and do this. And at the Woodlands, it was a different approach. It was a little more relaxed in terms of the marching thing. We did a lot more dance stuff there. And when I went to Vandergrift, it was the opposite. It was like, almost what I would say, like when I was growing up, like everyone considered the cadets to have the straightest legs, right? And that's kind of like how I felt about Vandergrift at first. And I remember just being like, I had never actually done it the same way they were doing it. You know, things had changed in like the 5 years since I'd been in high school with Mr. Spicer, and it's a lot of like there's like the toe point and the tendu and like really worrying about the 50-50 and your heel height. And I think the big thing was just with anything was like staying consistent with those certain aspects of it, right? Which was like the lack of knee bend on the first step, the weight transfer into 50-50 immediately. Some people talk about roll through. I don't really like talking about roll through personally, because I think roll through goes more into the whole bend leg thing. Like, I feel like more kids have trouble figuring out how to like roll through like this as opposed to like that, you know, and you don't want that second one in straight leg, or at least in the way I've taught it. So yeah, that's pretty much, the premise of straight leg, in my opinion. I think, you know, it looks great too in a band uniform. Like, you have like these band uniforms that are made to make people look a little bigger, and like they're walking and they have these long legs and they all move at the same time. Like, it looks awesome.
Speaking of band uniforms,
yeah,
I feel like you have something band uniform related.
Oh, yeah, I do have a hat. Should I like talk about what is my hat?
You gotta tell us about this. Like, you didn't talk a ton about your own personal experiences as a marcher.
So I marched the Santa Clara Vanguard from 2007 to 2011. Not the most famous of years, which is fine. But you know, it was a crazy time in my life. You know, I was very immature. And it's kind of ironic. I think it's good we go into this because I was really bad visually. I thought, and I know at least for the first few years, like really bad. And so it was the reason I got into teaching visual in the first place was because I was so frustrated with like how bad I was compared to everyone else. Like, I just did not understand, because I played baseball, I was athletic. You know, I was very fast. Like, whenever we did all sprints, I would like always sprint place and be really quick, you know, and beat a lot of people. And I just could never understand it. For me, it was mostly a mental game, you know? And so it's helped like really shape my life. And like, hold on, I've got to pet the feathers down. It shaped my life, and like, you know, it provided me like an outlet to have a good time, and like, honestly, like really dark times in my life, you know? So like, but anyway, getting back into like what we have here. So what we used to have at Vanguard is these hats that we called Aussies, and they're not like your normal band hat. You might have seen one or two in your time. But it looks kind of like this. It is like this. It's this.
That is it. What year is that?
I don't think we're supposed to wear these, but you know, whatever. But like, it looks like that, and we would put it like, you know, like this, so you couldn't see anything. It was pretty sweet, you know, because back in the day, it was more about looking cool than it was about being good, I guess. But yeah, like, it was an interesting little piece of history here, I guess.
That's really cool.
Yeah, the interesting thing about the feather is it actually comes like all shriveled up. It's like rolled up, and then we have to you would have to take out like a blow dryer, and you would blow dry the middle part until it was straightened out, and then you would just keep doing that, and you would straighten it out, and then they would let us kind of like make it our own. Like, so some people like wanted the top to do that and curve more, and like for me, like, I wanted it to go up and then kind of like go like very like gradual. Like, some people's were like that, which is like a little straight up one, you know. And then the hat brim, it's actually made of felt. It's like not cardboard. It's like really nice. Okay, it is straight, so I'll show you. Yeah, it's pretty straight too. What we would do is you would take Aquanet hairspray, and you spray the brim like all around, and then you would put like parchment paper and your shoes on top of it, and then you would just leave that overnight. And that's how we would have to take care of these things, because they're not plastic. So if you were to like, we have rules, like you can't hit this thing, like you can't swing it by it. One, for like a respect reason, right? But two, because it would like make it super wavy. So it was like always a thing that kind of like, I don't know, it's like peacocks and their feathers, right? Like, same thing literally with the feather, but also like, you know, you always wanted to have like the straightest brim and like have the most well-kept Aussie. We always held it like the same way. and you put your strap in here. Yeah, this is back when we had all these rules. It was crazy. But yeah, so as I said, someone who's not good mentally with stuff, rules were never good for me. So I had to learn a lot at SCV for sure.
That's great. And those are the things that we don't have anymore is, more corps are taking off their Shako or whatever they had on as headwear. So
yeah.
That's a tradition that I appreciate you sharing with us.
Thank you.
Wow.
Yeah, it is funny though that happened, and it's interesting too with the hats thing because, we went to the baseball cap thing and that, for a little while, and that caused so much controversy. Like, it's been interesting to me to see how like we've progressed as an activity and how, like some things are okay and some things aren't, having it always, and it's always an outrage at first, and then there's always a new outrage 2 years later. So
well, I appreciate your time, Adam. Thank you for giving us all that insight into your life, the Guardians life, and then of course the beautiful Aussie.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, man. We'll talk to you soon.